Hey everyone, it's Mafalda and welcome to another Emposia video, and in this one I'm going to be giving you some recommendations if you want to start reading classic literature but if you don't know where to start, because I know that it can be very daunting to start a new genre and to dive into a new genre, but it even becomes more daunting if you want to dive into classic literature, because I know that a lot of people are intimidated by this genre, but I'm here to give you some easy and fun recommendations that you can start if you want to start reading more classics. And as an English literature student, I will give you two recommendations of classics that I studied for my degree and that I really enjoyed, so stay tuned for that and let's get started. This first recommendation that I have is for fans of historical fiction and feminist stories, and it's The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I think this is the most recent recommendation that I have. This book was written in the 80s and it's already considered a classic, and it is set in the American Deep South between the wars, and it follows our main character Celie, who is a young black girl born into poverty and segregation. And the book is all told through letters from Celie to God and from Celie to her younger sister Nettie after they are separated. And it's a story about self-discovery and about love and finding love in the most unlikely of places. And it's a beautiful story, and it's a great place to start if you want to start reading more classics, because the writing is super accessible and also the way the story is told is super engaging, so I highly recommend it. Now the next one that I have is for fans of dystopians and science fictions, and this is a very classic one, but I think it's very overlooked, and it's 1984 by George Orwell. And I bet you have heard about the story and about this book, and it is very popular for good reason, and I think this was actually the first classic that I've ever read in my life. And this one is set in a dystopian society where everything you say and everything you do is controlled by a higher power called the Big Brother, and yeah, the Big Brother is watching you. And our main protagonist is called Winston, and he secretly hates the party that is controlling everything and everyone, and he wants to rebel. And this book is so brilliant because it is so current. Everything that is written in this book that was written in the 40s can be applied to today, and I just love the way that George Orwell crafted this world and made it so timeless, and I think that's what makes it brilliant. So if you like dystopians, I bet you're going to like this one. Now the next recommendation is for people who like to read romance books, and it's Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. You've probably also heard of this book. If you like swoon-worthy stories, if you like bold characters, if you like immersive settings, I think this is the one for you, definitely. And if you don't know, Pride and Prejudice is the love story between Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. The story is full of romance and betrayal and some miscommunication along the way, and it's also a story about sisterhood. And I still think if romance is in your preferred genre, you're still going to enjoy this one a lot, like I did, for example. And I just think this love story is super unique. Now the next recommendation that I have is for people who like YA books and also character-driven stories, and it's Little Women by Louisa Alcott. And this book is set during the Civil War in New England in the United States, and it follows the four March sisters, Jo, Beth, Amy, and Meg, and it basically follows them growing up since they are children until they are like young women, and it's about their adventures growing up and the relationships that they make and also the bond between each other. And it's a beautiful story about sisterhood, about the struggles of living during the Civil War, the struggles of being a woman during the Civil War, and it's a beautiful story. If you like character-driven stories, this is definitely for you, because the book is basically only following the March sisters' lives and them growing up and discovering about the world and discovering about themselves and their identity, because all of the March sisters are very different between them. And I think it's a book that anyone can relate to, and I think the writing is very accessible to everyone, and I think this book reads like a very modern classic even though it isn't, so I think that's great. And it is kind of a big book. This edition doesn't make it look like it, but it is a big book, but you just fall in love with the characters and you want to know more about them, so you definitely get through it very quickly. And now I have two recommendations that I studied for my degree and that are classics obviously, and that I really recommend you read it. And the first one is Passing by Lena Nella Larson. Nella Larson, that's right. And this book is set in 1920s New York, and it follows two women, Irene and Claire, and they are both black, but they are very light-skinned, and one of them goes her life as a white woman and the other one goes her life as a black woman. And they were childhood friends in a black community, and one day when they're older they come together in a cafe, I think, and it's basically about their lives, how different their lives are, because one of them passes as white and the other one passes as black. This is a brilliant exploration of race and identity, and also of this idea of passing that was very prominent in the first half of the 20th century, even the later half of the 20th century. And if you like to read about race, and also if you read The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett, I think this is a very good classic version of that book, because I actually think that The Vanishing Half was based on passing, not really sure, but I think it was. And this is also a very short book. I think it's under 200 pages, and I just think it's brilliant, and also the cliffhanger at the end leaves you guessing. Now, the second recommendation I have is Orlando by Virginia Woolf, and this is probably the trickiest one out of all of these recommendations that I've given you, because I don't think that Virginia Woolf's writing is the most accessible, but if you like to read about gender identity, I think this is the perfect classic for you to pick up. And this book is written as a biography of this person named Orlando. And what is interesting about this book is that this character, Orlando, starts off the book as a man, and we follow a lot of his life, and then halfway through the book Orlando changes sex and becomes a woman. It's so interesting to then follow his life, or her life I guess, as a woman in the second half of the book. But this is such an interesting book, full of fantasy and full of exploration of gender roles and exploration of sexuality, and I think it's such a different book from all of the other classics that I've ever read. I know that some of you out there put in your resolutions for the new year to start reading more classics, because that's something we all do, honestly, and I really hope you enjoyed these recommendations and that this video gives you the final push to start reading classics. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!